Okie dokie. Now, we have the clay bed for our cat complete, but before we lock him in, okay, there are other things that need to be done to complete this, to make it ready to build a box around it and proceed with actually making the mold. The first thing, all of the natural openings on the skull are required to be filled, the most obvious of which is the opening to the cranial cavity of the skull, the brain. Okay. Other large openings that need to be filled, obviously, is the ear canal located on the tympanic boules. We have the openings in the skull that accept the optic nerve in the back of the eye, as well as the veins from that part of the animal. There are other holes located at the front of the skull. These will need to be filled in as well, as will the nasal cavity that needs to be filled in. There are also things on here that are naturally occurring as a skull dries, and you do not want the silicone to leak in and lock your mold in place. Most obvious is along the nasal ridge here. You can see that seam right there. Okay. There's a seam right down the center and off to the sides. There are more sutures, skull sutures. Those need to be filled. Bottom of the skull. These openings right here, which connect the nose to the throat, also need to be filled. The front of the tympanic boules, these bulbous areas, have openings that need to be filled. What I like to use is a water-based clay. We used oil-based clay for the base, but I like to use water-based clay to fill the skull. When this project is done, these skulls will be returned to my skull collection. In order to do that, I want to remove all of the clay that I'm filling these openings with. And the best way to do it is with a water-based clay. It can be chipped away and then washed out and completely cleaned from the skull. I found this little brand right here in Michael's. This is a real high water content natural clay. It will shrink and crack, which is fine. You have AV's Critter Clay, which is available from many taxidermy suppliers. This is a water-based clay. The only problem with this, there are additives in it that keep it from cracking as it dries. It's an air-drying clay, but you want a clay that's going to have more of a tendency to break apart when you insert a sharp modeling tool into the clay. The first thing I need to do is turn the skull over, lay it down in its clay bed, okay? And I want to fill the cranial cavity with a little backing before we actually go to clay. And why is that? It would take a lot of clay to fill this. And I'd really rather not use that much clay. Plus, like I said, you won't be able to get the clay out. So what I use is, right here is a piece of plastic. This is a strip cut from a plastic bag, the kind of plastic bags you bring your groceries home in, or plastic bags they put your books in at bookstores and whatnot. This goes all the way in. All the way into the opening. You can see right there. Now, there's a slight springing action that will hold this in place. I've been asked, okay, so why do you need clay when this is already filled in? Because the silicone will get into any opening it can possibly seek. That includes the little tiny openings around this bag. So the water-based clay will fill this, and it will do a real good job too. All right, we're going to move on to next filling all the little holes with some water-based clay. Okay, to begin, I'm going to tackle the largest opening on the skull first, the cranial opening. Got a little bit of clay, and I'm going to make a little ball, flatten it, then pack it, like so. This is not rocket science. This is real easy stuff to do, okay? Like so. We want to make sure, though, that this is completely closed. We don't want any little open areas that that sneaky silicone can sneak past and ooze into the skull. Once it's filled, all right, I'll take a little brush and just plain water in a container, all right, wet the brush lightly, and then, simple matter, smoothing the clay. You can get in with your finger. My fingers are kind of big for this little skull cavity here. I use brush, I use modeling tools, I use whatever is required to help me fill all the little holes. The little holes, again, right here, right here. We want to fill those. I'm going to take the modeling tool, dip it in the water, fill these openings. And with the wet tool, just pull away the excess clay. I just want the little holes filled. I don't want it to look like the skull's been modeled over. I'm not looking for museum quality casting, but I am looking for something that's going to look like a natural skull. This just spreads the clay around, makes it nice and even, smooths out the entire appearance. What I did do off camera, I filled in the nasal cavity here on the skull with plastic. The interior septum bones have been broken away on this particular skull. And it needed a little something to help back it up. Again, I'm going to take a round ball of clay, like so. Just put it into the nasal cavity. Press it in with my finger. And at the same time, I'm going to seal those little seams that have opened on the nasal ridge. Dip my finger into the water. Smooth this out. Wipe away any excess clay. With my modeling tool, I'm going to get into the nasal area and I want to shape. I just want to give this some semblance of the shape of a deep nasal cavity without making it so deep. And you can see the shadow cast here. That's what I'm talking about. Like so. And then with my brush and water, I'm simply going to wet this and shape it. Try to get my ridiculously large pinky finger in there. There we go. Nice and smooth. That's nice and smooth. Next, I will fill the openings for the tympanic boules, which lead us to the ear canal. You always want to have a little more clay than you actually need when you begin filling the holes in the skull. A little more ensures that you don't accidentally push the clay into the structure. So we roll it, just plop that on there like so. There's a great big plop of clay. Smear it with the fingers, forward and back, around the top, around the entire shape. Dip the modeling tool in some water. It has a spoon-shaped end here. This will allow me to give some definition to the indentation here. Yep, and this is what I was talking about. When you press in just a little too hard, okay, you see how the clay is beginning to separate and fall into the ear canal. I want to try and avoid that. It happens. It happens. If you can avoid it on the first shot, great. If not, well, take a little more clay, do it again. Big blob of clay over that. Slide your finger backward. Slide your finger forward. A little water on the finger. Shake off the excess so it's not soaking wet. And just smooth what you got. There we go. There we go. There we are. Now this detail is filled and filled in smoothly. Okay? Next, on this side of the skull, staying on this side of the skull, I'm going to fill in the openings for the optic nerves in the interior of the eye socket at the back. And like so, again, we press with the finger, dip the finger in some water, make a smear out of the skull. These holes are now filled in. Modeling tool dipped in water, shake it out a bit. Scrape away the majority of the clay. All right. Finger in the water. And wipe over it again. Okay. Now, those two openings in the rear of the eye socket have been sealed. Okay? And it will not allow any silicone to leach into the skull through those openings. There's a little tiny opening right here. Just ahead of the tympanic boule. Right there. I'm going to fill that in, little knob of clay. Press it down. That's such a small hole. I need to press it in with my wetted modeling tool. There we go, like so. Scrape away the excess. All those holes are now filled. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is fill these little holes on the underside at the front of the roof of the mouth. This is where the Jacobson's organ is contained. This is what allows a cat and most mammals. They will take in scent through their nose. It will flow down here across the roof of their mouth, across some sensitive nerve endings, and the animal will trap that scent in their mouth by using what's called a lip curl. You've seen your own pet cats or dogs do this at home, where they turn up their nose and make that funny face. Same thing, these are such small openings. Simply going to take clay on the modeling tool, drop the blob of clay there, smooth it out. Smooth it out. All right. Wet it. Like so. Wet finger. Just like so.